Ah, there you are, and welcome to this review of the Strange Brigade, where we'll find out if it was worth the wait, or if it totally sucks. Find out next!
Hey everybody, I'm Morgs.
I'm Stabby.
And we're buddies, and we made this channel where we're going to take a look at games that aren't necessarily AAA titles, maybe some games you don't know much about, or maybe some games that you haven't heard about at all, but we'll play them and let you know what we think. So we're going to start off today with a review of the
Strange Brigade.
Oh no, I got it, dude. Yeah, we're going to start off with a review of the
Strange Brigade.
Alright, and we're going to hear from Stabby in a little bit. Alright, first up, Strange Brigade. Stay tuned.
We forgot cover art.
Run it.
So the Strange Brigade, it's a new IP that comes to us from Rebellion Studios, and it's billed as this rip-roaring adventure set in 1930s Egypt. It's very, very heavy on the co-op, and it supports 1 to 4 players online, where it does have drop-in, drop-out co-op, and it does have scaling difficulty, but one of the drawbacks is the game doesn't have the traditional couch co-op experience. It doesn't support split screen or any kind of local play, which, you know, that's probably more a sign of the times than anything else. And certainly in my day, all we had was couch co-op, and that was before video games. You just had a couch and you went and played on it with your friends, and then they went home. But, you know, it is what it is. So the game, like I said, comes to us from Rebellion Studios, and if they sound familiar, they probably should. They're responsible for games like the Sniper Elite series, the Zombie Army trilogy, and also some flawed games on the last gen of consoles that had some cult appeal to them, games like Alien vs. Predator and Never Dead, where there was some fun to be had there, but again, very flawed experiences. So let's take a look at the Strange Brigade and see if this is one of Rebellion's more polished offerings, or if it turns out to be kind of a flawed mess. Here at the show, this is a title that we've been excited about for a while now. Every time we saw it before it released, it was looking better and better, and it was sounding great. In fact, it was kind of one little oddity that really pulled me into the Strange Brigade, and for me, that was the voice of the narrator. He definitely gives it a definitive flavor. His accent, his cadence, it's all just pitch perfect, spot on. And once I got my hands on the game, at least from a voice work perspective, it doesn't disappoint.
Once more, we join our heroes in the skies of Egypt, focused as always on their mission to... Oh, dear. Focused as always on their mission... Oh.
But, as we know, 1 or 2 voices doesn't necessarily make or break a game, so let's jump in and see how we did with the Strange Brigade. And I apologize, it's a terrible impression, but the voice, it's infectious, it's fun to do, and I probably won't do it again. Probably. So who is the Strange Brigade? The Strange Brigade, it's a moniker that's assigned by the British government to this sort of supernatural offshoot of the British Secret Service. So in that respect, the lore feels a bit similar to Hellboy, without the horns.
But Hellboy doesn't have horns.
Shut up, Richard.
And that's the thing with the Strange Brigade. It's an intriguing team, and there's no doubt about that. You know, the first thing to note really is the game's approach to storytelling. It really hits you right in the face.
Hits you right in the face.
Yeah, right in the face with pulp.
With pulp.
And... oh no.
Stop the recording.
So this is a quintessentially British experience. It draws very heavily in its influence from action serials of the 1930s. But the over-the-top, tongue-in-cheek approach, it really serves the game well. It's this classic tale of daring do set upon by our team of plucky heroes.
And speaking of heroes, you have your choice of 4 playable characters. You have the Wayfinder, Nalangu Rashida, the Scholar, Professor Archimedes de Quincey, the Soldier, Frank Fairburn, the Engineer, Rosie the Riveter, also known as Gracie Braithwaite. And for early adopters, you can also download the Gentleman Explorer, Winston Bay. And while each character brings its own backstory and personality, we never really get to know them. The story's pretty thin, and we only learn about them through cutscenes, before and after the missions, and the various collectibles strewn throughout the levels, such as books and diaries. We want to understand them, but we barely did despite almost 14 hours of gameplay in various modes. We feel this is a shame and a missed opportunity to better invest the players in the game and the characters. And we're not going to spoil the story for you, but we will say that it follows a number of previously seen before plots. An archaeologist seeking fame and fortune disappears while looking for a legendary tomb that just happens to belong to an evil queen who ruled with malice and cruelty thousands of years ago. She was stopped and fell into obscurity. She can't be real, can she? Is this a good idea? We'll find out.
I wonder what happens if I read from this cursed book.
You must not read from the book!
No, it's not mine!
No!
And while the material is done well, there's just not much of it. It feels like you've heard some variation of this story before. And granted, original stories are hard to come by, so it's not a huge failure, but it's also not a huge success.
So onto the graphics. This is an arena shooter that looks great while you're taking on these hordes of enemies. It's animated well, it's lit well, and when I say it looks beautiful, I mean like beautiful, beautiful. And I love the color palette. It really deviates from the standard browns and grays that you see so much in the third-person shooter genre. You know, this isn't a gritty and gloomy tale. This is really Fable meets Uncharted. And that's especially true early in the game, where you're going to get these quips that pop up and show you areas of interest or where to go next. You'll also get graphical notifications that give you notices if you've killed 5 or more enemies in a particularly impressive way using, traps or your grenades or your amulets. And these are all their small touches, but they really add to the pulpy feel of the game. It's cheesy, and there's a lot of cheese here, but it's good cheese. This is Adam West's Batman sound effect cheese. So these notices, they're not just going to help you find your way around the level, but they're also going to pop up sometimes and show you a trap that might otherwise blend in with the landscape. And speaking of the landscapes, they're absolutely gorgeous. It's not an open world game, so the developers were able to put in a ton of detail everywhere. This isn't Skyrim where if you see it off in the distance, you can go there. But it is a game where if it looks like you should be able to get somewhere, usually you can get there. So it's kind of deceptive in its scale. And also, you're going to be rewarded for careful observation. You'll see in windows, you might see a crack in a wall, and if you walk up close to it and kind of peer in, look around, you're going to see some treasure inside in a lot of instances. And if there's treasure in there, that means you can get it. But how you go about actually getting in there isn't always going to be quite as obvious.
Throw a grenade!
So throughout the game, you're going to travel across a diverse number of environments, and they all look awesome. There's an underground pirate's cave, there's lush jungles, a market bazaar, and of course, a trip to the Egyptian desert. So these are all really rich, colorful places, and even with the game's cheeky feel, the world, it still feels believable. It feels like a place that really exists.
Which makes sense, because Africa's a real place.
And another thing that really bears mention is the enemy introductions. So this was kind of a call out or a callback to one of our favorite games, Borderlands, where every time there was a boss, you'd get a new cutscene to kind of introduce that boss. They were clever, they were witty, they were fun. And in the Strange Brigade, you actually get one of those for each new enemy type. You might just see their feet running up at first, going up a platform, and then all of a sudden, boom, they're right there in your face, and it tells you, what the enemy type is, and usually some kind of clever comment, on what they're going to bring to the table.
As to the animations, the character models move fluidly, and when you look at them up close, there are a lot of authentic little details. And that goes the same for the enemies, who also take context-sensitive damage, where you can blow off arms and legs, and they'll respond and adapt accordingly. The thing is, in a game like this, you're not going to have a lot of downtime. You're more looking for collectibles too. So when you stop to rearm or try and sort out a puzzle, I recommend that you take a look at the little things that the design team added. There's details everywhere, but the game moves quick. So if you don't make time to drink it in, I think there's going to be a lot here that goes unappreciated.
One small graphical inconsistency, though, that we have to call out is at the start of a level, it's going to show the number of players. In our case, 2 players parachuting down into the level. But at the end of the level, there's pre-rendered cutscenes where it shows all 4 members of the Strange Brigade, and they weren't there the whole time. So it almost feels a little bit like when you're in school and there's a group project and one of you or 2 of you does all the work, and then all of a sudden the rest of your peers do the presentation with you, everybody claps, and then they're like, "Oh, thank you," and it's like, no, you weren't here, you didn't help, you weren't a part of this.
That was some fight, huh?
Man, crazy, right?
Crazy.
on to the voice acting. Like we said at the top of the review, the narrator, pitch perfect. It works. He nailed it. He's charming, he's relevant, and oftentimes a lot of the things that he says, it's downright hilarious.
Well, cannon.
Oh yeah? Like usable cannon? Oh.
The Brigade, masters of stealth.
That was awesome.
Fantastic.
And he really helps hammer home those bigger-than-life adventure themes, like those that you would find in The Mummy,
Oh, hey.
or The Temple of Doom,
Okie dokie, Dr. Jones, hold on to your potatoes.
or even in games like Tomb Raider or even Crimson Skies. You know, his voiceovers, they brought back memories of from Borderlands, and sometimes had some of that fanciful nature of Wheatley from one of our favorites, Portal 2. This disembodied narrator, if he wasn't done just right, he could have actually been really annoying, but at the end of the day, he's probably my single favorite part of the Strange Brigade experience.
It's shaping up to be another classic adventure for the Strange Brigade.
So all the cutscenes, they're voiced really well. You know, you're going to enjoy little sound effects along the way, like the whirring of a film reel during these black and white storytelling scenes. And everybody does a nice job on the voices, so the issue that I have isn't with the voice work itself, it's just that there's not enough of it. They don't talk enough. And I know that's kind of an infrequent criticism, but at the end of the day, I feel like it would have been a big service to help flesh out the story and these characters and who they are.
The music itself is nothing special, but it does add atmosphere. It's mostly tribal drum beats that can wear thin over time. The guns themselves sound good, as do the amulets and the gem effects. They're not memorable, but they do serve a purpose. At a few points, a ghostly apparition shouts and shrieks in a haunting way, which adds some jump scares. To close on audio...
Like, comment.
Dude, what are you doing?
I made this hat.
I don't care about your hat, just go.
But
Go!
subscribe.
So, to close on audio, Rebellion, if you make a sequel or even a franchise, kick it up a notch. Turn your writers loose. They're tremendous.
On to gameplay, each of the characters brings their own starting weapon, attribute, and special ability to the mix. Effectively, they all wear these unique amulets that power up over time with the souls of your fallen enemies. And you use these amulet attacks, sometimes you can chain them together for some pretty special results, especially if you're making smart use of the many traps that you're going to find throughout the game.
Trap, 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 trap. Whack-a-flocka.
Another fun addition to the game are the numerous puzzles, which range from simply finding the right key to unlock a door to shooting the right patterns of tiles on a door's entryway. Sometimes you're going to have to do some serious searching for the right answers on how to get in, and you're definitely at an advantage with a co-op partner or two who are willing to help you find and come up with these creative solutions. One other time, though, we just shot at a door over and over and over until it opened. It's not an advisable strategy, but hey, it worked. And it's a bit unfortunate, though, that while the difficulty of the game itself ramps up as you move through the levels, the difficulty of the puzzles really doesn't. Unlike a benchmark game like Portal that makes you think more and more over time, in the Strange Brigade, you're actually going to be doing some of the same puzzles in the endgame as you were in the tutorial section. So while the game is really heavy on the co-op, there is a competitive element as well. Items like relics and the cat statues that you're going to find, those are shared evenly across the team. But items like books, gems, gold, health potions, and amulet powering enemy souls, they aren't. So these are very much first come, first serve, and between myself and Stabby, there's often not a lot of room for diplomacy.
Ooh, special weapons.
500. I still have not used a special weapon.
Oh, did you take my gun? You took my gun.
Oh.
You buy me one now. Oh, here, I'm stealing your stuff, see?
So it's really up to you and your team to see how free and willing you are to share the fruits of your labor. It's one of those things where teamwork, it's a bit of a mixed bag, and while you'll want to stay engaged in the action early and often, there isn't always a ton of room for strategy and tactics. There's usually so much happening on the screen during battles that oftentimes the best way you can contribute is just to kill everything in your path. Personally, I would have liked strategy and tactics to be a bigger part of the experience, but maybe that's just me.
Teamwork.
One thing that you're going to want to do is identify where the sarcophagi are before a big battle. It's one of those situations where if you run out of health, you're going to end up in one of those. And unless you've got a health potion handy, you're going to need to rely on a team member to come and rescue you. So you can revive yourself with a potion, but that wasn't totally obvious to us until much later in the game. And regarding the difficulty of the game, Stabby and I, we really didn't die much over the course of the first 6 levels. We maybe ended up in a sarcophagus, 2 or 3 times over the course of that duration. But then once we reached the 8th level of the game, there was a huge spike in difficulty, and it actually ended up in a situation where we almost had a rage quit from Stabby.
I'm down again.
Surely not.
Oh my god. I don't even want to play this anymore.
For the most part, though, the game does feel fair, it's well-paced, and it is an enjoyable experience, but it would have been nice if the difficulty was maybe a little bit more ramped up over the course of the game, or maybe just a little more even throughout. With regard to the gameplay, one thing that we have to call out are a pair of exploits that we leveraged probably a couple of 100 times over the course of the game. You see, at its worst, Strange Brigade looks a little bit like this. You're going to be rolling a lot in this game. You're going to be rolling into battle, you're going to be rolling out of danger, you're going to be rolling into pots, you're going to be rolling into crowds of enemies. While rolling isn't effective 100% of the time, it does feel like a bit of an unintentional superpower because you're pretty much invincible while you're in this movement. And speaking of unintentional superpowers, we've got to talk about the melee system. First of, it feels like there's a little bit of a delay between when you actually input the command on your controller to when the action takes place on screen. And when you do strike an enemy, you're going to send them flying about 10 yards, where then they're ripe for a finishing move. And when you perform these finishing moves, you're again virtually invulnerable. So in a game that's mostly about shooting, I found my way melee striking and stomping through some of the tougher fights just to avoid taking damage and preserving my health. And while the gunplay is satisfying, we both felt like there were some hitbox issues, especially on those bosses that forced you or required you to shoot them right in the glowy bits. Of course, maybe I missed because I have terrible aim, but if Stabby says it's a problem, I gotta trust that that's really the case. And this definitely drew out some of the fights unnecessarily, as did a few battles that really didn't give you much information about exactly what you were supposed to do. So there's definitely a few frustrating elements there. And speaking of frustration, twice when I was playing online in Horde mode, I actually had the game freeze on me. So once, it was a hard freeze of the game, I was able to dashboard out, and another time, all of the enemies just froze. They were running in place. I wasn't able to unholster or fire my weapon, so unfortunately I had to quit that match as well. But outside of those 2 issues, matchmaking was a cinch, co-op partners were plentiful, they were easy to find, and I was able to get right into games. So even so, it's just in the game's first week, that was a good experience all around.
All in all, The Strange Brigade is a mostly linear, contained sandbox game with a unique personality and a number of fun alternate paths, puzzles, and secrets to discover. And while I don't know that I would recommend the game as a purely single-player experience, if you're looking to have a great, mindless time with some friends, for us it's a buy, even at its current $50 price tag. Between me and Morgs, we give the game a 7.5 out of 10.
So this has been the Morgs
and Stabby
show. So let us know in the comments below how we did. Drop us a like or a dislike, subscribe, and ring that bell if you want to see more. And let us know what games are coming up that you're looking forward to.
We're always looking for recommendations.
So with that, be good, keep playing, and we'll see you next time.
I grew this facial hair just for this review, and my wife was thrilled. But she wasn't. She said it looks ridiculous, and she's right. I need to go shave. I have a day job.
Dude, that's so dumb. I can't do that.
Come on.
You're really gonna make me do this?
Just say it.
And that's a wrap.